Mukund Rishi's ashram and Dwarka. Ramadass occupied this ashram and remained in it for 10 days. He would light a small fire and squatting before it perform Ram Bhajan all the night. The place was full of birds and doves. Since it was a deserted and frightful place, the people of the town and sadhus were considering it a privilege to visit the sannyasi dwelling in such a place. Some of these well-intentioned friends at first apprised him of the supposed fears of the place. They were all told that when the all-powerful Ram protects, there was no room for any fear. Here Mahanlal and Kantilal were paying him visits daily. They procured for him from Muslim friends an excellent translation of the Holy Quran in English by a well-known Maulvi of Lahore. The Quran is indeed a grand work. Ramadass derived great benefit by a study of these teachings of the great Prophet Muhammad. Then Ramadass received the command from Ram to leave the place. Accordingly, he left Junagadh by the midnight train and after a change at some junction reached the station of Porbandar. From the station, he went to the city of Sudamapuri. The blessed Saint Sudama, the great Bhakta of Sri Krishna, had lived here and hence the name Sudamapuri. Here he was reminded now and again of Sudama's humble offer of beaten rice to Krishna and the loving acceptance of it by him, and also how Sri Krishna on one occasion washed the feet of Sudama, which brought to Ramadass mind the famous line of Swamy Ramatitra: "A slave is a slave because he is free." In the company of two sadhus, he visited the temple of Sri Krishna, said to have been erected at the spot where Sudama's cottage once stood. The same evening, he and the two sadhus, who were joined later by two more, in all forming a party of five, started on foot towards Dwarka. It was quite a jolly party, of whom an old bearded sadhu with a big turban on his head, a thick kambal on his back, a pair of wooden sandals in one hand and a broken brass pot in the other, a wooden armrest hanging by the shoulder, a white jacket on his body. And a carpin round his loins, was chosen the leader of the company. He was a simple, unassuming, good-natured and harmless old saint. Merrily the sadhus walked mile after mile, each narrating to the other some bits of experiences. Ramadass was all the time engaged either in listening to the stories or repeating Ram's sweet name. A halt was made for the night in a small wayside village, the residents of which treated the sadhus with great hospitality. Next morning, very early, the Sadhuram, the leader, gave the call for a start. Shaking off sleep, the sadhus rose and, soldiering their respective bundles, set forth on their journey. Thus they travelled on, breaking journey at midday and at night in villages until they reached the old shrine called Mula Dwarka, covering in all a distance of 20 miles from Sudamaburim. Here there was an ashram of a sadhu in which was found always an assembly of 20 to 30 itinerant sadhus. Here the new arrivals mingled with the sadhus of the ashram in happy association and then visited the old temple. It is said Sri Krishna had made his first stay at this place before he changed to Dwarka proper, or Bet Dwarka, as it is called. After travelling a little further, the party reached Gomati Dwarka. This shrine is also considered an important place of pilgrimage on account of the sacred river Gomati, which flowed here at one time but has since dried up. Now remains in place of it a tank in which pilgrims considered it a great merit to bathe in. After obtaining darshan in the big temple of this place and spending a day there in the society of many other travelling sadhus who visit in hundreds every day, the party strode on under the orders and lead of the Venerable Sadhuram. Arriving at the railway station, they got into a train which was already fully occupied by other sadhus. This carriage was called Sitaram carriage. It was really generous of the railway company to permit sadhus to travel on this line free of charge. It was an uncommon blessing of Ram to have secured for Ramadass the company of nearly 40 sadhus, all mixing with each other in perfect amity and innocence like small children at play. Each sadhu was busy opening his bundle or bag to exhibit to his neighbor sadhu his articles of curies such as conches, shells, rudraksha, small framed pictures of gods of various shrines, all collected during his pilgrimage all over India. At last, the train carried them to the railway terminus, a small station. Alighting here, they proceeded to the seashore, where they were allowed to board two steamboats belonging to a Mohammedan. When the permission was granted by the boat owner, there was a cry from all sadhus in one voice, Muhammad ki jai. The gulf was duly crossed and the sadhus reached the island of Dwarka. It was night when they arrived, resting in a dharmashala for the night. The next morning, the party visited the famous temple of Dwarkanath. An indescribable feeling of rapture and joy was experienced by Ramadass when he stood in front of the idol of Sri Krishna. He remained inside the temple for nearly 2 hours in a state of complete and blissful abstraction. He next wandered on the seashore, jumping from rock to rock, all the time absorbed in the meditation of Ram. The party of sadhus stayed here for 2 days. On the third day, at the command of the Sadhuram, the company started on their return journey. Now, an incident occurred which must be noted down. The party, as usual, stopped at a certain village for the night and at the command of the leader, all started before daybreak. The Sadhuram awoke rather too early. It was still dark, and the Sadhus grumbled that they could not properly see their way. There were also two more Sadhus who had joined the party at the village. These were young men, one of them totally blind, led by the other who was blind in one eye. The Sadhuram assured the party that the sun would rise soon, but for nearly 2 hours they walked on in the dark, stumbling, grumbling, and missing the way now and again. Still, daybreak was as far off as ever. They all took the leader severely to task, but the old Sadhuram was silently treading the path and did not vouchsafe and reply to the adverse criticism passed by his friends. He was himself groping in the dark with great difficulty and was at every step becoming more and more conscious of the fact that he had lost the way and that he was leading all in an unknown direction. On and on the party went. Now they came upon wet ground, then on muddy soil. Farther and farther they went, and at last found themselves in mud, knee deep. Now there was a furious cry of halt from all. It was yet pitch dark. Everyone was straining his eyes, except of course the poor blind sadhu, towards the horizon in expectation of signs of the rising sun. But the sun was still a long way off. Again, some of the sadhus grumbled and asked the Sadhuram as to what they should do next. The Sadhuram never replied. After fruitless discussion for some time, they arrived at the unanimous conclusion that they should wait there until daybreak, for to attempt to move might invite a worse fate. Perhaps a fail into a ditch or a deeper descent into mud. Next, Bombay. So about an hour was spent standing in that morass in severe cold. At length, the flaming chariot of the sun god came speeding up the horizon, heralding a day of hope and joy. Most of the sadhus of the party were now determined to abandon the leadership of the Sadhuram and forming group of two amongst themselves moved away from the place. But Ramadass, who was all through as silent as a top, busy with the repetition of Ram's name, clung fast to the Sadhuram, helped him in carrying his sandals and lota and followed him. Although for a time the sadhus were separated, they all met again at the nearest railway station. Here, all of them got into the train going northward. At Viramgam, a change had to be made in the rush of passengers. Ramadass and the Sadhuram missed each other and did not meet again. Probably the Sadhuram, who wanted to proceed to Madura, must have boarded a train travelling still northward. Ramadass, with some other sadhus, got into a train going towards Bombay. Ram's kindness was so great that the train he sat in happened to be one that travelled directly to Bombay without requiring any change on the way. The train had almost neared Ahmedabad when At a certain station, a ticket inspector came in to check tickets. He found about half a dozen sadhus in the carriage without tickets, of whom Ramadass was, of course, one. He gave an order that all sadhus should get down. Accordingly, one by one, the sadhus dropped down from the carriage. Now Ramadass also rose up, but the ticket inspector, who was standing quite close to him, placing his hand on the shoulder of Ramadass, pressed him to sit again, saying, Maharaj, you need not alight. What I said was not meant for you. O Ram, why this preference for Ramadass? No, he has no right to question thee. Thy slave is ever bound to thy holy feet, O Ram, and that is all. After passing Ahmedabad, some friends in the carriage provided him with fruits, etc. He found later that all passengers around him in the carriage were very kind to him, although he was all along silent but only repeating Ram's name under breath. About 8 o'clock in the evening, the train reached the Grand Road station in Bombay. Here, coming out of the station, Ramadass, as prompted by Ram, proceeded directly to Buleshwar. For the way, he had to make enquiries now and again as he walked on. Now arriving at the temple, he rested for the night on one of the stone steps of the inner temple. Here, close to the temple, there was a big storied dharmashala instituted in the name of the generous mother Janagibai. The dharmashala was always full. It could accommodate 2 to 300 sadhus. About 4 o'clock in the morning, Ramadass, who was asleep, woke up to listen to a most rapturous song issuing from the dharmashala. The subject of the song was Radha Krishna. The manner in which the two devout mothers were singing was full of pathos, and the voice filled the air with a sweet, fascinating charm. One seemed to have mingled with the music of their voice, felt himself raised to heights of ecstasy, and was lost in it as long as the singing lasted. The day broke. Finishing his bath at the water tap, Ramadass had just returned to his seat when he was presented by a friend with a chit or ticket and was asked to accompany 6 other sadhus who held similar chits. You are all invited by a merchant for dinner at his residence, he said. So, all the 7 sadhus followed this guide, who led them through several streets until they were brought to the entrance of the host house. Since there was still time for dinner, the sadhus sat down under the shade of the trees in the compound. Ramadass had just sat down on a log of wood when a sadhus approaching him said, Swamiji, the ticket which was given to me is lost on the way. I have been going without food for 2 days. Shall I be able to secure dinner without a ticket? The only response which Ram made Ramadass to give at the time was to kindly and cheerfully hand over to him his own chit and instantly walk out of the place. He now wandered in the sun like a madman. Why say like a madman? He was really mad of Ram. He walked and walked. Unconsciously, he directed his steps to the fort and wandered from one street to another. At a certain turning on the footpath, a grief-stricken man of middle age saluted Ramadass and offered him a pie. Returning the salute, he said that he would not accept money but would take fruits. At hand there was a mother selling plantains. The friend bought one plantain for the pie and handed it to Ramadass. Now he made Ramadass sit on the path and narrated his story. He said that he had only one son who was a veritable jewel. He was so intelligent, so mild, so good in character, so promising, so affectionate and loving, and also so handsome in features, such a model of perfection. And this son was carried away by plague about a month ago. Ever since this heavy loss, he had been stricken mad over the sad blow. He therefore begged Ramadass to find a way for him to bear this calamity. Ramadass then replied, "Brother, to sorrow over the loss of your son is to hug delusion. To be free from this sorrow means to know the reality. There is only one way to wake up to this reality, and that is to meditate upon God. How can I do it? I cannot control the mind," put in the friend. "Well, now begin here to repeat the mantram which Ramadass is bidden by Ram to give you and see the immediate effect." Saying thus, he gave him the apadas of Ram mantram and made him repeat it then and there for about 15 minutes without stopping. While he was doing this, a sense of relief came to him. Then he rose and, saluting Ramadass, said that he had secured the right key to unlock the gates of peace. He further admitted that since repeating the mantram, he had been experiencing calmness and he would not give up repeating it always. Then he left the place. Ramadass continued his mad walk. Now he passed through the broad road adjoining the port trust buildings and docks. He went on and on, now going into a mass of streets and lanes, then passing over bridges and railway crossings. At last, he found himself about 3 p.m. in front of a building which was familiar to him. Looking up, he discovered the signboard of Brother Ramakrishna Rayo, portrait painter by profession. Ram prompted him to get up the staircase, and in a few minutes he was in the front room occupied by the artist brother. He was welcomed by the brother most heartily. With this brother he remained for 4 days. The members of his household were also very kind to him. During his stay here, Ramadass was utilizing the morning for visiting the various temples of Bombay and the sadhus residing near the temples. He spent one night on the footsteps of the large tank of the Vakeshwar temple, keeping awake almost the whole night in Ram Bhajan by Ram's command. Then he proposed to start. The kind brother Ramakrishna Rayo escorted him as far as the railway station and, getting him to a ticket for Nasik, saw him sit in the night train. Ramakrishna Rayo's anxiety for his comforts was so great that he pressed him to take a small packet containing plantains, oranges, and some sweets. The train started. Ram now got Ramdas the company of another friend who was sitting beside him on the same bench. He travelled with Ramdas as far as 2 stations this side of Nasik. All the way he was talking of nothing else but Ram. Now and again he would sing about Ram composing songs extempore. In fact, he was more mad of Ram than Ramdas himself. Here, Ram was teaching Ramdas how to become really mad of him. It was a perfect delight to enjoy his talk and songs of Ram. It was all Ram's preordained, plain, and Ram is always kind. Before alighting, this friend requested another passenger to guide and take care of Ramdas. In due time, Nasik was reached. The new friend guided him out of the station. Here, finding a motor tram waiting, the friend got into it, beckoning to him, and Ramdas followed suit. Soon the tram was full of passengers, and the bell sounding, it started. The tram conductor, after clipping tickets for other passengers, came to Ramdas and demanded fee for the ticket. Ramdas had, of course, no money and so nothing to say in reply, while a number of passengers sitting near him in almost one voice told the conductor not to bother the sadhu, as he was not supposed to possess money and that he should be allowed to sit in the car. Of course, the conductor yielded to their appeal in behalf of Ramdas. About 3 miles were passed when a ticket inspector got in. He was an elderly man with whiskers. Coming to Ramdas, he asked for ticket. But Ramdas having no ticket, the inspector began to fret and worry over it, saying that the sadhu could not be allowed to travel free. When he was thus complaining, the same friends who had pleaded for Ramdas with the conductor again spoke for him, but could produce no impression on the inspector. So the only course open for Ramdas was to get down. Accordingly, standing up, he requested the inspector to stop the car so that he might alight. Here again, Ram's power prevailed. The attitude of the inspector now suddenly changed. He told him not to trouble himself and that he might continue the journey in the tram. Ram's tests are at all times coming unawares. One should always be prepared for them and face all vicissitudes calmly and in complete resignation to his will. Then there is no sorrow, no disappointment, no fear of any kind. Thank you.